They say the two most important days in your life are the day you are born and the day you find out why. Well, you and I, we were meant to be free. And now God invites you to a soul-shaking, chain-breaking, life-giving adventure with your closest friends. We will share our stories of struggle and bravely explore the uncharted places of our soul. We will do this together and promise one another we won't stop until we are free. Liberation awaits. Today, freedom calls out your name. This is the way, the new way to be free.
Hey, good morning. I hope you're doing well. Let's have a word of prayer together. Lord, thank you so much for the morning. Thank you for the opportunity to be with these incredible folks and the opportunity to talk about your word and what it might mean for our lives. And I pray, Father, that you would hide us in your cross and that you would take front and center stage and that we would all leave here, with no doubt that you spoke to our hearts and lives today. And it wasn't Tom, it wasn't the worship team, it was you. You spoke to us and your spirit was present, and that we would all know what that means and we would all sense that today. So allow us to take whatever concern we have, whatever pressure point we have in our lives, and just lay that before your throne of grace even right now. And whatever might be in the way between us and between you, we just ask you would speak freely and clearly to us in your name. Amen. A brand new series just started last week. If you missed last week, you can go online, you can go to the app, or you can go online and you can find all that and you can watch it there, and that would be fantastic. But this series is called Freeway, a not-so-perfect guide to freedom. And to be honest with you, it was that second part that really got my attention because I feel like a not-so-perfect Christian oftentimes. And so that was kind of this moment to say, hey, I wonder what this series might actually have to teach us. And so last week we introduced the topic and we begin this week. Now, in this series, you remember I brought the couch up last week, and it's a series about kind of flipping the cushions in our lives and clearing out some of the crud that everybody sort of carries around, and everybody's sort of been gathering in the nooks and crannies of life. Because whether we acknowledge this or not, or realize it, hurts and memories and false assumptions and fears and shame things, producing events, all those settle into our hearts and hold us back in this life of true freedom. And the great illustration, and I kind of learned this from years ago from a counseling friend of mine, and he said, Tom, whenever somebody comes and sits in your office, they come not just with themselves, but they come with all this baggage that they kind of carry around with them. And so this morning, you're sitting here and you got a nice seat, but you're going to have baggage around your feet. Everybody in the room has it. These shame-producing, guilt-producing things I wish never had, I shoulda, woulda, coulda, things that happen in our lives are sort of gathered around with you. And everybody in the room, including the guy you're looking at, we all have these sort of things. And so all these problems and these messes start gathering in our lives, and they're kind of carrying around with them for years, and we get accustomed to carrying them. In fact, we kind of have these coping mechanisms that make us look really good because we're able to carry all these things and still look pretty normal and still look like we got life going for us and everything's going forward in a positive direction sort of thing. But whether you realize it or not, all of us have these things. Now, the most shocking thing, the most difficult thing is this first step of this first week. And that is, it's the issue of awareness. The most difficult thing is for us to be able to sit in a room like this and say, hey, you know what? That's my bag, or that's my deal, or this is my thing. It's the issue of awareness, because if we're not aware of it, everybody else in our life may be aware of it. People that actually love us may be aware of it, but we're not aware of it. And so we live life as if that baggage doesn't exist. I got an illustration for this that I want to share with you to it's crass. I'm just going to tell you that right up front. It's a crass illustration, but I think it's going to make a spiritual point. So Lisa and I are getting married, and that's not the crass part. Lisa and I got married, and then we did like a 3-week honeymoon. And so I was in charge of planning the honeymoon, and I'm an incurable romantic. And so I scheduled us a week at a children's camp in 2 different dorms, and then a week with my mom and dad at their house. And then we spent a week in Virginia at a state park, had these 2 little thin, separate mattresses. It was like sleeping on a diaper. And we kind of had this, it was incredible, wasn't it, honey? It was an amazing romantic holiday, and we were poor. So we didn't have any money. But that's not the point of the story. The point of the story was this. We were in our first week of our honeymoon, and we had a Dodge Omni hatchback because we were cool like that. I had a 1968 Ford Mustang that was terrible on gas, and so we traded in for a Dodge Omni, kind of an upgrade. And now, if you're not familiar with a hatchback is one of those cars that has the big glass windshield in the back, and so you could put all this stuff in back there, and so that's important to the story. So we are on our honeymoon, and we're in the Virginia State Park, and we're enjoying ourselves and all that kind of stuff, but the problem was, every time we got in the car, something malodorous would happen. Now, you got to understand, I'm a brand new husband, and so I really wasn't sure how to bring the conversation up. But every time we got in the car, I'd sit there, I was like, oh my word. That's one of the most ungodly things that has ever passed through my nose. What in the world? This became a matter of prayer for me. I would go to the Lord and said, Lord, fix her plumbing, whatever is wrong. I thought maybe she had some kind of genetic disorder or something. I was praying for her. I was like, something is dead in that woman, and she doesn't even know. And I thought that was kind of the action of every time you'd get in the car, you should kind of lift her leg and get in, because my grandfather could, but that's another story. And so every time we get in the car, and I'm telling you guys, it was horrible. I was seriously like, should I get this annulled? What in the world? It was horrible. And finally, like the 5th day, I got in the car. Oh my goodness, it was, the headliner was sagging off of the top of the car. And I finally turned to her, I said, honey, why do you do that? And she said, what? Every time we get in the car, you float a biscuit or something. I don't know what happens. But this is horrible, and I can't spend the rest of my life with you like this. To which she said, I thought it was you. So we get out of the car, and we have a temporary happy dance that it's not each other, right? Like, oh, maybe we can make this marriage thing work out after all. It's like, oh, honey, I am so glad it's not you. I cannot tell you. But then we started looking around in the car, and ends up what happened is we have some old friends, actually ex-friends, who had buried a 5-pound fish under the spare tire in the hatchback of our car. And by the time we discovered it, I don't want to get crass. Too late. By the time we discovered it, things were moving on top of the fish. So we get this thing out and we got rid of the thing. Now here's my point. I do have a spiritual point for that entire story, so unfortunately you won't remember it, but here's the spiritual point. Awareness is the first step on the path to true freedom. If we never discovered the fish, I'd still think she had a problem, and she'd still think, well, you actually discovered I do have a problem. But anyway, stick to the manuscript today. Okay, so once we begin to honestly see what's causing all the pain, well, then we can honestly deal with what's there. Does that all make sense? If we can discover what's causing the pain, we can deal with it. Once we honestly see what's causing the anger or causing all the stink, well, now we can get somewhere, and that's what this message is all about. It's about awareness. We have to be able to identify the mess, and that takes tremendous courage in this room. Because here's the truth. We all spend most of our lives trying to pretend like the mess isn't there. Or we try to spend as much as we can in our lives organizing an identity in which the mess is non-existent. And what I'm asking you to do today is kind of push all that aside. And what if we started with the premise, everybody's messed up. Everybody has a mess. And tried to deal with that. And here's why this is so important. Awareness is going to begin by realizing we all have this mess. But it ends by realizing God's incredible love. And so that's the process. And to kind of get at the process, I want to take you, Jesus has just delivered the most amazing sermon ever preached. It's found in Matthew 5, 6, and 7. You can read it for yourself. It's called Sermon on the Mount. And in the Sermon on the Mount, this is where Jesus said blessed are the peacemakers, blessed are the poor in heart, and all those kinds of things. That sermon, or where he taught us to pray, our Father in heaven, hallowed be, that's out of that sermon. This is also where he said that you're to be salt and light. This is where he says, don't worry. All that stuff is in that sermon. And so he finishes the sermon, and he starts coming down off the mountain, and then in Matthew chapter 8, an event happens that I think was amazing. It was absolutely stunning. So here's the event. Matthew chapter 8. And he looks beneath what's happening. He looks beneath the surface, and he goes right at a core issue. Amazing thing. Matthew 8:1. When he came down from the mountainside, large crowds followed him, and a man with leprosy came and knelt before him and said, Lord, if you're willing, you can make me clean. You can make me clean. Now, most likely the man had heard what Jesus said on the mountaintop. But the man was a leper, you know that, so he wasn't able to actually be in the crowd like you folks are. He was a leper. He would have had to sit outside the crowd on the far boundaries. In fact, the rule was you had to stay 6 feet away. And he was part of a community that they had to put bells around their neck so that you could hear, and they would ring the bell and they would shout, unclean, unclean, as they would walk through town. This leper, here's what Jesus says about being pure of heart. And he's so moved that he loses all of his societal expectation and the societal law, and he runs right to the feet of Jesus and kneels. And this is where we have to start with the whole awareness, and it's simply this. For heaven's sakes, bring your mess to Jesus. Bring your mess to Jesus. My goodness, we're all living lives, especially in church world, as if nobody has a mess. Y'all are some of the messed up people I know. And I'm one of the most messed up guys you will ever meet. Bring your mess to Jesus. Now, sometimes that mess is really obvious. There's been times in my life where the mess was really obvious even to me and to those who love. And so these are I did some obvious messes search on the online today, or online this week, and this is what I came up with. Here's the first one. You may not know a lot about cars or engines, but if a friend pops the hood of their car and you see something like this, you'd say, well, here's your problem. See, what you have here is you got a gigantic snake on your engine, and that's going to mess it all up. You should probably get rid of that. Now, you may not understand the complex issues involved in public education, but if you were to read this headline, you'd say, well, here's your problem. See, there was a song somebody wrote, M-I-S-S-I, S-S-I, P-P-I, and so you've misspelled, and that's literacy, so, Now, you may not understand all the different reasons people protest. Everybody protests over all kinds of things, but if you're driving down the road and you see this particular individual holding this sign up, you might say, well, here's your problem. First of all, you misspelled moron. The irony of which is too good to pass up, and so I should point this out. Some of you may say, Tom, I'm not computer literate at all. I'm just computer illiterate, and I don't have a clue. But if you ever kind of were in the office and you looked around and you saw this in your printer, you'd say, well, there's a problem. That mouse doesn't belong in there, and it also explains why the cat keeps sitting on top of the printer, We got a friend, one of our staff, and her husband works on printers, says this happens all the time. All the time. So you may want to check that when you get home. It's a free public service announcement right there. So some problems are really obvious, like a snake on the engine, or like, you misspelled the sign, or you got a mouse in the printer. And for this man coming to Jesus, it was an obvious problem. The man was a leper, and everybody knew it. There wasn't any hiding his baggage. It was public. He was a leper, and so he kind of went before Jesus, and he approaches Jesus, and he's aware as he goes to Jesus, man, I'm a complete and utter mess. And I can't do anything about it. And so he hears what Jesus says, and he takes this risk, and he approaches Jesus and says, Jesus, I know if you're willing, you can make me clean. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus has just described what a life with him looks like, and then he diagnosed the reason why people miss out on life with Jesus. And this is what it is, namely, our own messed up hearts. It's not all this outside stuff. It's actually an inside problem. And immediately Matthew records a person coming up to Jesus and saying, can you help me with this mess? A mess so big that everybody in the community knew it. And I think oftentimes we tend to not recognize or deal with problems, especially in church world, until they hit the surface. But Jesus can see right into the core of all of our issues, like a snake on the engine or a mouse on the printer, and Jesus can say, well, Tom, here's your problem, man. Well, here's your problem. Your heart keeps sabotaging your life. You see? Here's your problem. Your heart is sabotaging your life. That's the problem. And the Bible actually teaches we have this fallen nature. And what that means is, as beautiful as you all look in the room right now, our hearts are sinful. Our hearts are actually missing what God's design is. And so what Jesus is saying is actually pretty cool. He's saying, Tom, here's the problem. Your heart is sabotaging your life. You might be interested to know that there's actually research taking place that affirms what Jesus taught. There's a guy that's a professor at Harvard. His name's Dr. Dan Gilbert, professor in psychology. His assignment is to study happiness. Wouldn't that be a great job? To study happiness. And this is what he wrote. Research suggests that people are typically unaware of the reasons why they are doing what they are doing. Isn't that amazing? And aren't you glad it's not true about us, just other people? What's so curious about human beings is that we can look deeply into the future, foresee disaster, and still do nothing in the present to stop it. The majority of people on this planet, he writes, they're overwhelmed with concerns about their immediate well-being. So culture may say to you, just follow your heart. Jesus wouldn't say that. In fact, research wouldn't say that. Jesus said, your heart is messed up, dude. It's messed up, and it will lead to a bad place. The psalmist, do you remember what the psalmist wrote? He says, search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See, Lord, if there's any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. See, that's a prayer for awareness. That's like, man, Lord, make me aware. It's how you set aside the sin and the shame and self-reliance that stands between you and God. This is how you do what the leper did. You pray to the Father, search me and just show me what's under the cushions in my life. Show me what's messing up my life. And I was thinking about this just in a couple of areas. It could be the hurt that happened in our life or your life somewhere along the way has actually caused you to pull back away from people. So now you spend the rest of your life, you kind of got people in a stiff-armed position. You keep people right out there because someone way back then hurt you. Well, that's an awareness thing. You don't get hurt as much, but you also don't get loved as much. Some of us in a room of this size, of course, it's sexual mistakes and a sexual past that fill your heart. And as soon as anybody mentions anything about shame or anything about guilt, your mind goes right to the sexual bonehead play that happened on that night or that season of your life or whatever. And Jesus would say, it's not the issue of sexuality, it's the issue of your heart. The heart is where the mess is. And it's producing all these other messes. And when we begin to pray, God, search me and show me how I can be the person you really desire to want me to be, you're taking this massive step toward awareness. Awareness begins by realizing the mess, and then it ends by realizing God's love. Watch what happens to the leper, 8 verse 2. Man with leprosy comes and kneels before Jesus, says, Lord, if you're willing, you can make me clean. Now, what does the man have? Do you remember? What's his disease? He's leper. Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. He said, I am willing. And that kind of leads to the second point. I just want to share that, bring your mess to Jesus. Here's the other one. Jesus is willing. Jesus is so willing to deal with our mess. One of the most damaging things people carry around with them is this idea that God is somehow ticked off at you. Someone when you were growing up taught you that God's just fired up and mad at you all the time. Do y'all remember Far Side, that cartoon? And there's this Far Side cartoon one time when God's sitting at his computer and he's got his finger over the smite button. And he's basically waiting for you to walk under a piano and bam, got him. I got Tom. There it is, I got him. Some of you, that's exactly how you see God. Let me just say, you messed up, man. You got to be kidding me. That's how you see God? You say, well, Tom, who is God? Well, I would say, look at Jesus. If you really want to know who God is, look at Jesus. Look at Jesus in the scripture. Read it for yourself. And there you'll see how God reacts when messed up people come to him, when an unclean leper runs to him. The leper comes running to Jesus. Now keep in mind, in that day, if a leper wanted to play tag, nobody else played because the leper was going to mess you up. And so when the leper comes running at Jesus, the normal reaction for the leper running at Jesus would have been to back away and say, oh my goodness, there's a leper on the loose, kind of thing. But not this Jesus. You want to know who God is? Look at Jesus right here. Jesus isn't indifferent. He doesn't ignore the man. He doesn't try to pretend like, leper's not here. Just kind of look around. He doesn't do that. He does something shocking. And we can't even relate to this because you and I, we don't even know what leprosy is. But he touches the leper. Now in this story, let me just help you understand. You're not Jesus in the story. You're the leper. I'm the leper. And so I got to thinking about if I was this man and Jesus doesn't ignore me, I was thinking about how, suppose I'm married and I got Lisa and my 3 kids and I'm the leper. How long has it been since I've had Lisa and my 3 children hug me or love me? Because they can't touch me anymore. And y'all have all rejected me too because I'm a leper and you don't want to get sick, so you keep me at a distance and you tell me to sit in a special place. But Jesus in this moment reaches down and touches the leper. Now that's a big deal because Jesus doesn't always touch people when he heals them, but he does it. Do you remember one time Jesus didn't even go? He did like a drive-by healing. He just healed somebody that was far away. He just healed them. But this one, he reaches down and touches the man, and the crowd would have gasped. What is this holy man touching an unclean, infectious leper for? But can you imagine what it would mean to you if you were the leper? You just heard this Jesus talk about the Sermon on the Mount and this new kingdom come, and that holy man reaches down and touches you for the first time in however long. You want to know what Jesus look like or God's look like? Look at Jesus. You want to know what God's like? He touches the untouchable. That's who God is. Mark records the story as well, and he uses one of my favorite phrases in all of the New Testament. Mark says, Jesus was moved with compassion. It's actually that word splanknon. I shared it with you last week. It's another word for like Jesus was punched in the gut kind of with compassion. He was doubled over with compassion. That phrase only occurs 12 times in the New Testament. 11 times it's Jesus in response to somebody's mess. He's moved with compassion when he's like punched in the gut, slugged in the gut over this man. You want to know what God looks like? Look at Jesus in your mess. Lost in grief, lost in sickness, lost in hopelessness, lost in direction, lost in a reputation. Jesus feels compassion for the man kneeling before him. He didn't want to smite the person. He wanted to smite the disease and clean up the mess. And then look at what Jesus said. Did you hear it? Jesus said, I am so willing. I am willing. If you have ever wondered, now, no pretending, just get real in a moment, but if you've ever wondered if God is willing to set your heart right after all the screw-ups in your life, there's your answer. God says, I'm willing. God's desire is to actually help you in the most powerful way possible. Not just heal the mess, but to heal the source of all your messes. To heal the source of the whole thing and say, man, you get a brand new heart here. Not just all this stuff that you got packed away and messed up, but let me take care of the root problem of everything. Let me get you a brand new heart. Now, some of you have wondered if God is really for you. You wonder, can God really forgive me for all the things I've done? Well, Jesus would say, you know what? I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to do that. And you say, Tom, I don't know, and you don't know, and I don't have to know. Jesus said he's willing, and I'm kind of staking my whole life on the fact that he said that to me. Will God really help me face my addiction? Well, Jesus said he's willing. Is there hope for the marriage? I mean, marriage is hitting a rock. I mean, we're in a bad place. Is Jesus able? He says he's willing. Am I ever going to be able to forgive that person who hurt me? Am I ever going to be able to trust again? Will I ever be able to overcome fear? Will I ever be emotionally healthy? Jesus says, hey, I'm willing. He healed this leper and many people physically when he was on the earth, but that isn't what he came to do. He actually came to heal what he's trying to heal in you. He came to give us new hearts that would point us toward God. He came to give us a new spirit so that we could not only be fully healed, but we would become a source of healing for other people. See, God desires to heal us from the inside out. The only question really isn't whether Jesus is willing. The question is whether or not you're willing. Because it takes so much courage to be able to sit in a place like this and say, man, I got all this baggage here. And that's no fun. I don't even like talking about it with you people. But I got all this baggage, and I know Jesus is willing, and I guess I need to be willing to offer that to him. Jesus reached out his hand and he touched the man. He said, I'm willing. He said, be clean. And immediately he was cured of his leprosy. I don't mean to make this a recipe. It's not a recipe sermon. It's more direction. Because the dude gets up and he walks in freedom in a way he never has before in his life. Brings his mess to Jesus, and Jesus embraces the man and his mess, and the dude walks in freedom. Leprosy has disappeared. And this guy's huge gamble has paid off in the biggest way he could imagine. I mean, think about it. The gamble. The leper comes running in there before Jesus and before all those crowd. Now, keep in mind that in that day, they would have been perfectly legal for them to stone the man for running into that crowd. And he goes before Jesus. He says, I know you can make me whole. He doesn't know Jesus from Adam. And yet Jesus makes him whole, and the man gets up and he's walking in freedom. In our lives, we bring our message to Jesus too. That's what we do. Some of you brought your mess to Jesus last week for the first time. And some of you have been doing that throughout the summer, and you realize that Jesus is actually willing to heal and forgive and restore and help you. And then you are now walking in freedom, and you think, man, I'm going to start taking my next steps. And so you join a small group, and maybe you're going through the Freeway Series together. Maybe you're going through it on your own. I don't know. And one of those next steps for some of you in the room that you need to pray about is making that public dash to Jesus like the leper did. And the way we do that in our church is through baptism. Man, I got out, this is a baptism, by the way. There's going to be a baptism at the end of the month, at the end of September. And man, I walked out the front door this morning. I prayed for all y'all getting baptized. It's going to be cold out there. It's going to be cold. And so we'll all get in that thing together. But you're going under. I'm not. I've already done that. I'm just telling you, you're going to have to go under. But, you know, it's this baptism is this moment of you saying to people, man, you're saying to the community, hey, guess what? I was dead in this shame. This was one of the bags I had, but God has brought me to life. One of the bags I had was I just couldn't receive any forgiveness, but Jesus forgave me, and now I'm brought back to life. I'm new in him. I have a new heart. Marriage was toast because I was a selfish, egotistical pig. God changed my heart, and I have been made free. Follow? Follow. And see, that change of my heart has allowed me to start unpackaging some of these things. And for some of you, your next spiritual step is to go public with your faith in that baptism service at the end of September. You can do that through telling somebody on staff or email or apps or all that different kind of stuff. Let me kind of share this last story with you, and then I'll wrap this up. But this thing moved me so deeply this week. It's by a girl by the name of Amanda Bast. She wrote on the BuzzFeed site if you want to go check it out for yourself later. But she's born with spina bifida. And spinal bifida is this condition where nerves are missing from the spine, and one result is your legs are often underdeveloped. And in Amanda's case, she could walk, but her legs were misshapen and her feet were two different sizes. And she writes, as a little girl, I was happy, but when I heard the verse found in Psalm 139, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made, I believed that I was some odd exception to that rule. Surely a loving God wouldn't have purposefully made me like this. And then even as an adult, she sort of struggled with feelings of shame over her appearance, as you might imagine. And at a wedding, though, she decides one day to wear a skirt. And despite being self-conscious of her condition, she just wanted to do it. She felt pretty, she says, but at the reception, a woman starts staring openly at her legs, sort of in disgust. And Amanda says it's the kind of reaction that always makes her want to hide. It makes her think the lower half of her body cancels out any beauty in the top half of her body. It makes her fear she'll always be underestimated, misunderstood, and never deeply known or loved. But then listen to how her story ends. Listen to this paragraph from Amanda. I've decided that I'm going to be beautiful. Don't you love that? I've decided I'm going to be beautiful. Not the kind of beautiful that's loud and proud and in your face. I'm going to be the kind of beautiful that is steady and understated, gentle and quiet, but strong. It's based on the knowledge that I have been intricately designed by the same artist who painted the trees and the flowers and the mountains and the oceans and the skies. I'm even more breathtakingly beautiful than the physical world because, unlike those mere things, I was created in the image of God Himself. I'm okay with not knowing why things happen the way they do, with not knowing exactly why I was created the way that I was created. I'm okay with it because I have faith in someone who is astoundingly bigger and greater than myself. I am deeply and truly known by the one who created me, and I have a relationship with Jesus, someone who flipped everything upside down and caused a lot of ruckus. And He declared that the weak are strong. The kingdom of God belongs to the least of these, the broken, the sick, the poor, the lonely. I can't help but be totally enamored and thrilled by that knowledge. Amanda says next time she wears a skirt and someone stares at her legs, she's going to say, they're really great, right? Someday God will give her brand new legs. But in the meantime, God has given her a brand new heart. See? God's given her a brand new heart. One that is known and loved and courageous. So your legs may be messed up, but that isn't your problem. My anger may be messed up, but that's really not the problem. Our marriage may be messed up. That's not the problem. The addiction may be messing up life, but it's not the problem. It's your heart that's the problem. It's my heart that's the problem. And Amanda's found what basically we are all made for, and that's to be fully known and to be fully loved. To have hearts so full of God that we're okay with being a mess. God, keep us from being a church where everybody's expected to be perfect. I don't want to be part of that church. Don't expect me to be perfect, please. I can't live up to that, and I won't expect you to be perfect. But I will give my heart to Jesus. And God will create in us a new heart, and He wants to do it for each and every one of us in the room. He loves us as we are and wants to love us into what we're meant to be, and God can do it. But it will start with you. It'll start with me. Bringing our mess, not someone else's mess that you've identified, but bring our mess to Jesus and ask for His help and walk in freedom. And Jesus says, I'm willing, Tom. And it starts with the awareness of our hurts and faults, but it ends with the awareness of God's love. And that's the journey that we're on through Freeway. And I hope that you will be courageous enough to at least wrestle with the truth and think about it.